Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back to Chapter 23, Circulation. We had just got done talking about a little bit about the flow of the blood through the heart. Let's look at an image of a capillary, and let's talk about how the blood flows through a capillary bed. This is an artery here. We talked about in the last video how an artery carries blood away from the heart and into an organ. So this good, fresh blood is coming from the heart and goes down through the artery, and this is going into an organ. This is going into a tissue bed. This is going into feed cells. You can't see them, but just imagine that there are cells totally filling this area right here, and that this is bringing fresh blood to them. This fresh blood comes in the artery, and when this fresh blood makes it here onto the artery side of the capillary bed, most of the fluid volume is forced out. Most of the liquid of the blood. Remember, blood is two different things. It's liquid and cells. The cells stay in the vessels, but the liquid comes out. Most of the liquid comes out. In that liquid is all the good stuff that the blood is carrying, the oxygen, the nutrients, all that stuff, and that feeds the cells that live in this area right here. On the vein side, most of the blood that came out is going to make it back in. All of that fluid goes back in, kind of rehydrates the blood, and now it's used blood. It's had all the good stuff taken out, plus it's had trash put into it. Trash like carbon dioxide, trash like metabolic wastes, trash like trash. So this trashy blood now is going to go back to the heart, so the heart can send it to the organs that's going to take the trash out, and to the organs that are going to refill it with oxygen and nutrients. Capillary bed. Most of the fluid comes out on this side and feeds the cells. That fluid that came out comes back in on this side and then gets taken back to the heart so it can be refreshed. Let's talk about the different styles of hearts that there are. The first kind of heart is a one-chamber heart, and one-chamber hearts are really simple, and it's kind of a stretch, to be fair, to call them a heart at all. It's really just a muscular tube. It's just a muscular tube that squeezes, and when it does, the blood literally goes both directions. You know, if you're holding a water balloon, you squeeze it in the center, the water is going to go to the top and the bottom. It's going to go both directions. A one-chamber heart. Mollusks, simple mollusks, and annelids have one-chamber hearts. Your simplest organs your simplest animals that actually possess a heart are going to have a one-chamber heart. We move on from the one-chamber heart to a two-chamber heart, and now we have a little bit of difference, and this heart is more efficient. A two-chamber heart has a way in, called an atrium, and a way out, called a ventricle. Between the two is a little door, a little valve, so that when the ventricle pushes to push the blood out, it goes just one way and it doesn't go both directions like what we saw in the one-chamber heart. When a one-chamber heart beats, it just pushes blood in both directions. It doesn't actually have a preferred path. So with the two-chamber heart, we've got that door now between the atrium and the ventricle, and when the ventricle contracts, it actually closes that door and makes it so the blood can only go out towards the body. It can't go backwards the way that it had just come from. And this is an advantage. This is a major advantage. And what this does is this increases efficiency. It makes the heart itself quite efficient. Fish have two-chamber hearts. Their two-chamber heart goes through one circuit, which means the blood leaves the heart, goes to the gills. From the gills, it goes to the body, and from the body, it comes back to the heart. That is a one circuit system. We'll talk about how that's special in just a bit. Let's look at a one-chamber heart. And we see here, this is an earthworm. You may have heard that worms have like 9 hearts or something like that. And these fat sections of blood vessel are actually the hearts, quote unquote. It's just a muscular section of blood vessel that just will squeeze. And like I said, when it squeezes, it sends blood both directions. And it sends blood both directions, up and, in this case, up and down, both ways. So they've got multiple hearts. They all squeeze and force the blood that way down the length of the body of the animal. We move on from a one-chamber heart to a two-chamber heart. We see here a two-chamber heart. This may not look very much like what you imagine a heart to look like. Here is that atrium. This right here, this is that way in. So used blood comes from the body, this direction, and it comes into this atrium, this entryway. The atrium will push blood down to the ventricle, this larger chamber down here. And this little thing right here is a valve. Valve literally means door, so it's a door. But in this case, when we talk about valves, we're always talking about one-way doors. You can only go through it one direction. So the atrium pushes blood through this valve down into the ventricle. The ventricle will then push the blood to the gills. Obviously, what's going to happen to the blood in the gills? It's going to pick up oxygen and dump off carbon dioxide. Not only that, because it's a fish, it's also going to drop off ammonia. It's also going to drop off nitrogen wastes. In Biology 1, we talked about how whenever you burn proteins, you make nitrogen waste. We use our kidneys to get rid of nitrogen waste. Fish don't. Fish use their gills to get rid of nitrogen waste. The ventricle pumps blood to the gills. In the gills, the blood drops off oxygen, picks up carbon dioxide, and now that it is freshly oxygenated, it's going to go to the rest of the body. And in the rest of the body, it's going to drop off that oxygen, it's going to drop off the nutrients, and then it's going to come back to the heart so it can go on this, round, never-ending cycle. But again, it's just one loop, just one circuit. Heart, gills, body, back. It is important to note that the blood is going through two sets of capillaries. That's generally, when we talk about the three-chamber heart in just a minute, we'll see how that's not the case. With fish, it goes through one set of capillaries in the gills, another set of capillaries in the body, and then back to the heart again. One circuit. With a three-chamber heart, we still only have the one way out, but now we've got two ways in. We have two atria. One that brings blood in from the body, and then one that brings blood in from we'll call it the lungs. It's not exactly the lungs in all cases, but for our purposes, we'll call it the lungs. Now we've got those two separate circuits. The heart is going to send blood to the lungs where it picks up oxygen, and then it comes back to the heart again. And then the heart sends that now oxygenated blood to the body. And then it comes back to the lungs, heart, body, heart, lungs, heart. Two circuits. We'll talk about, in just a second, I'll show you a picture of how a three-chamber heart works. Four-chamber heart works the same, except it doesn't just have one bottom chamber, not just one ventricle. It actually has two ventricles. Let's go ahead and jump into it and look at it in just a minute, and it'll make more sense. Mammals and birds have four-chamber hearts. Amphibians and reptiles have three-chamber hearts. These two chambers that we just talked about, these two chambers that we just said, look, we got two chambers. There are two circuits. The two circuits are the pulmonary circuit and the systemic circuit. Pulmonary means having to do with lungs. Systemic means having to do with the body. So the two circuits now, remember, fish only have one circuit. The systemic circuit and the pulmonary circuit is all the same circuit. This is one circuit. With a 3- and 4-chamber heart, now we have two circuits. Pulmonary circuit is blood goes to the lungs and back to the heart. And then the systemic circuit, blood goes to the body and then back to the heart. Two circuits. It's more efficient to do it that way because the blood only goes through one set of capillaries before coming back to the heart. Okay, here we see a toad with its three-chamber heart. Here is the atrium. This is where the used blood from the systemic circuit, the used blood comes back to the heart in the right atrium. The right atrium sends blood down to the ventricle. When the ventricle contracts, it's going to push blood both directions. But at this point, we're just going to talk about how it goes to the lungs. Ventricle contracts and it pushes blood to the lungs. And it says pulmonocutaneous. Remember, amphibians breathe a lot through their skin. They use some lung respiration. They use lots of skin respiration. So it's going to both. For our purposes, just think about it in the lungs at the moment. Ventricle contracts, sends blood to the lungs where it picks up oxygen. This now oxygenated blood comes back to the heart again. It comes back in on the left atrium. And from the left atrium, it pushes blood down into the ventricle. When the ventricle contracts, it pushes blood. Now this time we're going to follow the systemic. This now good oxygenated blood is going to go down to the body. The body is going to use the oxygen in it and send it back to the heart again. 2 circuits, lung circuit, body circuit. Notice how the blood never goes through more than one set of capillaries before going back to the heart. Capillaries, heart, capillaries, heart. When we talk about mixing is the blue is deoxygenated blood and the red is oxygenated blood. Notice how there's not a wall here between the blue side and the red side, which is why we see a little bit of purple here in the center. We do have mixing. It's not as much as you would expect, but we do have mixing within a 3-chamber heart. Though, to be fair, it's not that big of a deal for amphibians, because reptiles and amphibians, they're ectothermic. They don't use nearly as much. They use 1/10 as much energy as a warm-blooded, as an endothermic creature uses, because they don't have to spend all that energy making heat. Yes, we have mixing. It's not as bad as it seems.